I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
if Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
Hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
We will never let this topic die. More Joker news. Todd Phillips says DC's Walter Hamada didn't get it in referring to the Joker.
So a couple things have come out recently with Todd Phillips making the rounds even more after the Joker's success, breaking over $1 billion at the box office, being the highest box office grossing rated R movie of all time. He beat Jesus. On a podcast with Michael Moore. Yeah, that's right, Michael Moore, the documentary maker. If you're wondering if that's just a coincidence that the person was named Michael Moore, no, it is him. So it's kind of funny. He has a podcast apparently called Rumble with Michael Moore Podcast. So on the Michael Moore podcast, Todd Phillips said this: when the regime changed on the Warner side, the regime also changed on the DC side. They put a guy in charge at DC, Walter Hamada, who had been running a small horror label at New Line. So he didn't have muscle to stop it, and I'm not saying he would have, but he didn't get it. And because on paper it's crazy, he just stepped into this new job, and we just made Shazam and Wonder Woman. We're doing okay. Do we really want to mess with the formula? The formula. Very key phrase there, because that's something that's been used a lot towards the Marvel movies, is their formula. Basically, at this point, how their brand success is what keeps them breaking box office records consistently. Is it's not necessarily, the variety of the movies, it's the formula of the movies that just apparently have quite a success when it comes to Marvel movies.
Yeah, when I first read this article, which came out on Christmas Eve, so December 24th, that was the first thing that came to my mind was the formula, and that obviously when bringing in Walter Hamada, he wanted to start to establish something. Unfortunately, kind of sounds like in the same vein as the MCU. He wanted to start establishing like, okay, this is what our movies are going to be. So when this gets brought up to him by Todd Phillips, he's like, I don't know. And that's where he's not quite understanding where Joker was going to go, the direction that Todd Phillips wanted to take the Joker, and how he wanted it to be a standalone movie. You have the Shazam and Wonder Woman on one side, and they're trying to establish a whole new brand, which Walter Hamada was successful over at New Line doing. So now that's exactly why Warner Brothers brought him in to run DC, is to establish kind of some consistency within their movies. And now you have the Joker on the complete other side. So it could be taken either way. It could be as a positive that, okay, yeah, they're trying to establish something within the DCEU, but at the same time, it could have been detrimental potentially if he had the muscle to stop it, as Phillips put.
It's kind of funny too, because horror movies, especially nowadays, are kind of looked upon on how cheap they can be made and get such a return in the process. You film it for less than $5 million and you have an opening weekend of $20 million, and you just, you quadrupled your success right there alone in the opening weekend. Kind of funny that a guy that came from that background wouldn't understand, at least in some sense, doing a more gritty, rated R, low budget comic book movie. You think he would kind of at least understand it in some sense, but I guess not. And Phillips continues, and so I really understood his point. But in some ways, I had enough weight behind me at that point, not overrule it, because they could have easily said no. We just kept our foot on the gas, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease, as you say.
Fuck your couch. Buy another one, you rich motherfucker. Fuck your couch.
Phillips continues, we just made a thing of it for a long time. Truth be told, the budget was so small, and I say so small in relation to other comic book films, not small. We ultimately made the movie for $60 million, but at Warner Brothers or at DC, that's like an independent film to them. So we kept it so under the radar and so small that in some way it felt like not a can't lose, but like, okay, what could we really lose on this if it's a disaster and nobody wants to see it, if it's boring? So they just let us go and do it.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
which means, at least in some sense, Walter Hamada, who was appointed by Toby Emmerich. So I never quite understood everybody's admiration for Walter Hamada, that he was going to somehow save the DC universe. At least, though, in some sense, he is open-minded enough to listen to Todd Phillips' pleas about this movie and realize you don't need a formula, you just need to make good movies. Don't worry about trying to make a consistent run of mediocre movies that will give you box office returns. Just make good movies and you will always get those box office returns.
And the truth shall set you free!
It's kind of funny too, because if you go back to some of the older articles that were going on before Joker's release, Todd Phillips was actually talking about how he did have this struggle with executives at DC about doing this movie. In the Chicago Tribune, he had a quote saying, "It was a year-long process from when we finished the script just to get the new people on board with this vision, because I pitched it to an entirely different team that made it. There were emails about, you realize we sell Joker pajamas at Target. There were a zillion hurdles, and you just sort of had to navigate those one at a time. At the time, I would curse them in my head every day, but then I have to put it into perspective and go, they're pretty bold that they did this." What I said previously, at least he did have somewhat of an open mind to go through with this, and it shows some success. Unfortunately, as we saw a while back in another article, they passed a lot of the profits on to other people. People invested a lot into this movie, and WB is getting less than 25% of this box office because they didn't want to take the risk on it that much. He can probably say, yeah, you did a great job, guys, thumbs up, because he's getting a bunch of the money and a bunch of the returns on this. So I'm sure he's pretty excited about that, him and Joaquin Phoenix. It's a little bit of a give or take. Yes, they let the movie go through, but they really didn't have any confidence in the movie whatsoever.
Yeah, you're starting to see, in terms of the quote regarding Joker pajamas at Target, you can kind of get into the mind over at Warner Brothers and DC of what they, in their mind, what they think these films should be. That they should be pushed more by the product and not necessarily by the film itself. Maybe you can make a cool Joker t-shirt based on a film, and you're kind of starting to see that with some of the films that they have recently released or are going to release: Wonder Woman 84, Shazam, and even Aquaman.
And you can kind of see this really stuck with him, the pajamas thing. It really got to him because he brings it up later on in other things. He also reacted a little bit to Martin Scorsese's heat, quote unquote heat, that he got for talking about whether or not the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a theme park or real cinema. Marty got a lot of heat for what he said, but I understand it fully. We were struggling to get Joker made, which sounds funny because it exists in a superhero world, but it's really not one of those movies. We spent a year at Warner Brothers, and I saw emails back and forth, literally, where they said, does he realize we sell Joker pajamas at Target? I go, didn't movies come first and pajamas come second? Are the pajamas dictating the movie? Pretty much exactly what Shane just said there. It's kind of like this ebb and flow of like creativity versus marketing. And a business is always going to be a business. And to maximize your profits from a particular IP, an intellectual property, how can we maximize this as much as possible with cups, toys, shirts, compared to just the movie's box office return and the quality of the movie? So there's always this give or take. And I think if DC kind of keeps on this pace, they can do both, which is what we've kind of been saying from the start of this channel, is that we never understood why there couldn't be both. Why does it have to have this lighthearted, funny MCU shit all the time? Like, it's diluting the product. It's hard to say that because of the box office returns we've seen for superhero movies this year. But at the same time, that has got to start weighing down on people a little bit. So why not have this variety? Why not have the Shazam and the Joker in the same year? Completely polar opposite movies. Why not have both?
Because there's a chance you could be wrong. Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
And why not have the story dictate the success of your movie instead of maybe the merchandising behind it? Parents will still buy Shazam toys for their kid regardless of what the story may be. I will still continue to buy Batman and Joker stuff regardless of the Joker movie itself, even for my kids. You're not losing out on the merchandising profits by making a story and a solid movie. You can have the box office success and you can have the merchandising as well. They don't have to be tied together to have a successful movie and to make money off of it.
Adults still buy stuff. I don't know, some people might call it childish. If you put the marketing out there and you can still sell to adults, it is still there. There's still money to be made in the marketing, even for a rated R movie. So that's the other thing that just doesn't really make sense to me. Plus, kids are just, if they want something, they're gonna get it anyway. It's ridiculous at this point. Like, they think that they put an M on a video game, like kids have never played a rated M video game.
It's exactly why when Matt and I were kids, we had Terminator toys and RoboCop toys. Regardless of if we saw the movie or not, they still had those toys out there. We were still able to obtain them. We saw, you could see just the trailer and go, oh yeah, that guy looks awesome. A current example is my youngest, who's in kindergarten, loves the Star Wars lightsabers and all the ships and even how some of the characters look, but he has never seen a single Star Wars. He watches some of the cartoons now, but that's about it. They've done a good job at least showing, oh, look at these awesome guns and the lightsabers and all the cool stuff marketed that way as toys. He's suckered right in along with all of his friends, and he has not seen a single movie.
One thing here that keeps coming up quite frequently, and again, Phillips was asked about it, is a sequel.
Phillips says when a movie does $1 billion and costs $60 million to make, of course it comes up. He laughed.
And just look how happy he is.
But Joaquin and I haven't really decided on it. We're open. I mean, I'd love to work with him on anything, quite frankly, so who knows? But it would have to have a real thematic resonance the way this one did, ultimately being about childhood trauma and the lack of love and the loss of empathy. All those things are really what made this movie work for us, so we'd have to have something that had an equal thematic resonance.
I guess in theory, if they were able to do something very similar again, low budget, Joaquin Phoenix, Todd Phillips, and they had free creative control, would you want to see a sequel to The Joker? And under those conditions, and which is something that he's presenting that he would like, I would say yes, even though I really don't think we need a sequel at all. And I have no clue where they could go with one. I would actually really prefer Todd Phillips to venture out to other characters and kind of take this franchise and be that kind of Kevin Feige, I guess, or whatever you want to call him. Not so much the Jeff Johns version. And kind of streamline some of these movies and concentrate on doing more of these type of movies with different characters, because he's talked about this DC Black Label before, and I would like to see that kind of franchise get expanded and maybe somehow intermingle with each other.
Exactly. Those are my thoughts exactly. The first thing that popped into my head was kind of the Unbreakable trilogy that we ended up getting, that maybe you could have characters done individually that cross paths eventually. If you wanted to have Joaquin come back and play Joker, that's fine, but I really think we should have more of these movies that are kind of maybe not necessarily standalone, but they focus on one individual character, whether it's a villain or whomever. Do it this exact way, relatively low budget, really grounded, focused on the character itself. And then maybe if you want to have some of the characters intermingle with each other down the road, then fine. But having a sequel, direct sequel to Joker, I don't know. I feel like you've kind of told the story you wanted to tell, and where do you go after this without introducing a hero or someone like Batman?
Batman's not a hero?
No, he's an anti-hero.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.